He put out this album called Relapse. Weird, but it was him from a technical. I go deeper. It was beats Dre's never really tried. Like it's good. I didn't even like it at first. It's fucking sick.
So, looking back 11 years later, how was it making Relapse?
Relapse was the first recordings that I had did where the lights came on.
So, are you happy with Relapse? I mean, do you enjoy going back and re-listening to it?
Relapse is something that I looked at in a couple of years, went back to and cringed at. A lot of stuff on Relapse I know really was kind of comical. A lot of stuff was funny punchline jokes, but a lot of the songs didn't really feel like anything. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, I didn't even realize I was doing that many accents. Started on this weird serial killer vibe and started wanting to talk crazy and started bending words more, and the only way you can bend them is with this accent, trying to use this one.
What's going on, everyone? Today I'd like to take you all on a journey of one of the most underrated albums by the one and only Mr. Marshall Mathers. A little bit of trivia about me, I'm an Eminem stan, and I have been for over half my life. I'm 23, and I've been a fan of his since I was 10. I do plan on making a future video about why Eminem means so much to me. There's actually a very specific reason why he's so important in my life. Another topic for another video for another day. Let's get into the subject of discussion of this video. Personally, Eminem's Relapse is one of the most underrated albums in his entire catalog. It was his resurgence album, released in 2009 following a 4-year hiatus following his 2004 album Encore. Relapse is reminiscent of some of M's earlier works, like the Slim Shady LP. On Relapse, M is zany and goofy. It's a silly, goofy album full of dick jokes and gross moments that aren't necessarily gonna change anyone's life. Instead, it's an album that showcases classic M rapping his ass off. And that's honestly one of the things that attracted me to his music back in the day. It was different. Maybe this is an unpopular opinion, but I think that Relapse is easily one of M's best albums, on par with some of his upper tier albums like The Eminem Show or the Marshall Mathers LP. Yeah, I said it. At 11 years old, Relapse was the first album that M released of original material since I boarded the Eminem train and became a fan. Needless to say, I was excited. Now, at this time I was young and I didn't really appreciate music or films as much as I do now, but this album is brilliant, and I'll tell you why. Relapse got a lot of hate by fans and critics alike when it released, mainly because of the accents that M used in abundance. Honestly, the accents didn't really bother me because they not only allowed M to rap more dynamically and use very unique flows, the accents appropriately brought out this creepy serial killer vibe, closely mirroring some of pop culture's most notable serial killers like Hannibal Lecter, for example. There's even a great line in the final track, Underground, where M says, "Gave Hannibal Lecter a fucking nectarine and sat him in the fucking fruit and vegetable section and gave him a lecture." That's so dope, man. I don't care what anybody says. These accents bring me to the strongest, most compelling attribute of this album that I'm trying to convince the internet of.
Relapse is a concept album.
One of the only records of this kind in Eminem's discography. In Relapse, M falls back into the trap of drugs and violence, and therefore falls back into the character of Slim Shady, and the album follows suit. Let's talk about the skits on this record. The skits on Relapse are the best in M's career. Dr. West gives me chills every time I listen to it. It's a dark, brilliant opener to this album. A twisted rehab doctor forces M back into drugs, and therefore releasing Slim Shady to go on a killing spree. And now we're at 3 a.m. A few songs later, we get the skit Tanya, which depicts Slim Shady abducting and raping a girl whose car broke down. It reminds us that Relapse is a story about the twisted nature of Slim Shady. Then a few songs later, we get Must Be the Ganja, where M cleverly relates working in the studio to a drug addiction, which is followed up by the skit Mr. Mathers, which verbally reenacts M's close call with death back in 2007 when he overdosed on painkillers. Now, usually skits are irrelevant to me. They mostly come across as album filler, but on Relapse, the ancillary skits feel absolutely necessary to its overall concept and in telling a complete story. In regards to songs, I would say the 5 best tracks, or my favorite tracks, would be 3 a.m., Hello, Stay Wide Awake, Deja Vu, and Underground. I feel as if these songs best represent the whole of Relapse. Dark, Slim Shady-esque, and full of evocative wordplay. 3 a.m. is probably the most significant track in regards to this album's concept. An opener that dives right into the wacky nature of it, where Slim Shady goes on a murder spree after relapsing on drugs. Deja Vu is one of my favorite songs on the album, and one of the only serious songs on the record that poignantly brings you into M's world. But the way that M uses this demon voice of sorts to represent the addiction inside of him is genius. It's personal, hard-hitting, and most of all, vulnerable, which is rare for Eminem, especially around this time period. Hello's definitely another one of my favorites. The hook is catchy, the beat is brooding, and M just seems like he's on top form with this one, reintroducing himself into rap similarly like he did with his earliest hits like My Name Is. Stay Wide Awake is another great track, mainly because of the flow. I feel as if it's a challenging flow, but one that M used like a champ in telling a story about a serial rapist, and he made it catchy. I swear, man, only M can pull that shit off. And Underground ends the album as true as it opened it with 3 AM, but it feels almost like a freestyle. You know, it doesn't really have a direction necessarily, just some sick flows, wicked imagery, and great rhymes. For example, M goes, "Hit Jason Voorhees with a 40, stuck a suppository up his ass, and made him tell me his story." I mean, like, it's a great fucking line, come on. Just classic M. In my opinion, M's strong point, especially in recent years, is not so much crafting great songs, but it's crafting great verses. And when you embrace that, I think you gain a greater appreciation for his music. Now, I'm not saying that he doesn't write good songs or catchy hooks anymore, it's just that his rhyming is where he shines. I think that concept albums are my favorite kind of albums because they're not easy to pull off. They take a lot of work. Sticking to a consistent theme throughout the record, making the songs build off one another and feel as if they're telling a complete story or they're following a specific narrative or something along those lines. It's no easy task, but M did it and made a concept record that stands with some of the greatest concept records that we have, like Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City, the Eagles' Hotel California, or even Pink Floyd's The Wall. And I think to get the most out of Relapse, or really any concept record, you need to listen to it from beginning to end, from the first song to the last song. Because think about it, M made a calculated choice to put the songs in the order that he did. 3 AM wouldn't be as hard hitting and wouldn't make sense conceptually if it was in the middle of the track list as opposed to the first song. See what I'm saying? I want to briefly talk about one of the 2 bonus tracks on Relapse, My Darling. Careful What You Wish For, the other bonus track, is great, but My Darling is genuinely one of the most haunting songs that I have ever heard in my life. If you've never listened to it, go listen to it, but be warned, it will make your skin crawl. I'm not going to get into the conspiracy stuff with My Darling, but I will say that it contains some of the boldest, most cryptic lyrics of M's entire career. Like when he sequentially says, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, that ain't the hook, now follow me. My Darling is a track that heavily focuses on M's fame and career. The devil then appears to M and suddenly sucks him back into the abyss of fame and fortune. Now obviously M still wants to rap, especially now that he's sober, but My Darling is so powerful because it leads you to question that in a way, whether or not he still really does want to rap. The devil wants M to dye his hair blonde again, says that he let his daughters grow up and blossom, and that's enough. Now it's time for him to return to this dark place. It's time to return to Slim Shady. It begs the question, was Slim Shady the problem? A false persona that attempted to attract attention in the early parts of his career? I think this is why My Darling is so enigmatic. Just think about some of the imagery presented in this song. M says that the mirror that he's looking at grows lips and whispers, "Come closer," and that when M looks at a poster of his, he sees the devil standing next to him. That's fucking terrifying, and a brilliant dive into the intricacies and mysteries of fame that us civilians cannot really quite understand, and it's perfectly appropriate that it appears on Relapse, but it will make the hairs on your neck stand up, perhaps in the best way possible. 25 to Life, a song that appeared on Recovery, similarly discusses fame in a cryptic way, but it's nowhere close to being as diabolical. My Darling really does masterfully depict a hellish back and forth conversation between M and his inner demons. Not many other songs have had that effect on me, which is something to be noted. A lot of you might be thinking, Alex, Relapse is a very dour, dark, and unsettling album. Yeah, and? I mean, it involves rape, murder, and other unpleasantries. So, if you're a fan of Eminem's, you know not to take the over-the-top content too seriously at face value. Instead, you embrace the rapping because of the skill that it took to rap the way that he did. The rapping on the entirety of Relapse is so on point. I don't think many people disagree with me on that. I think that if there were no accents on Relapse, a lot of people would have loved this album. It's a shame that they let the accents bother them. The content is dark, sure, but it's so Slim Shady, and I think that's the point. Slim Shady was always a sick character, but on Relapse he's depicted as an almost ungodly being, a force of nature. Relapse is the last real Slim Shady album. It feels as if they could have came out during Eminem's prime run in the early 2000s. Relapse represents the end of an era, since Recovery represents a shift in M's career and overall process of crafting albums in a very positive light, full of pop singer features. Neither Recovery, nor the Marshall Mathers LP2, nor Revival, nor Kamikaze, nor Music to Be Murdered By feel like Relapse. I doubt we'll ever get an album like Relapse again from M. All in all, Relapse is special. To close this off, let's talk about the production, another one of the reasons why this album is so fantastic. Relapse is the last album of M's that is entirely produced by Dr. Dre. The chemistry between these two legends is palpable, and Dre is one of the greatest hip-hop producers of all time, no question. The beats on this record are insane, pun intended. They're mixed nearly to perfection. They all sound different while simultaneously maintaining this creepy vibe to them. The beats on Relapse don't really sound like anything else that came out in 2009, so it stands out, especially 11 years later. Honestly, listening to this album in 2020, it's even better than it was in 2009. The beats are awesome, they're catchy, and perfectly reminiscent of vintage Dre, full of slick guitar riffs, ominous strings, and cacophonous percussion. The sounds really contribute to the overall dark tone that M and Dre sought to create. I doubt we'll ever get another album of M's entirely produced by Dr. Dre. The two have not dedicated several months to sitting down and crafting an album from scratch, bouncing ideas off of each other, and creating something that feels very complete. In having Dre in the room the entire time, Relapse doesn't sound like a random assemblage of songs, it sounds like a complete album. Let's face it, Dre knows how to make great albums. The crazy thing is, as dark as Relapse is, it's incredibly well-rounded. It pleases all kinds of Eminem fans, with catchy radio songs like We Made You, Slim Shady songs that take shots at celebrities like Bagpipes from Baghdad, and nostalgic songs that remind us of vintage M, like Old Time's Sake or Crack a Bottle. Relapse is one of M's most unique and underrated albums of all time.
It's interesting. Fun time. I had fun making the record.
Thank you so much for watching, guys. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment, subscribe to the channel. I'd be more than appreciative if you did. Have a great day, and I will see you all next week. Take care, everybody.